Hey all, Bree from the No Guilt Mom podcast, and I have got a gift for you this holiday season. If you love the No Guilt Mom podcast, and I mean love the No Guilt Mom podcast, then tell us about it. Leave us a review, and you can be entered to win a No Guilt Mom gift card. All you have to do is leave a review, take a screenshot, and then simply go to noguiltmom.com/review to enter our giveaway for a free No Guilt Mom gift card, simply for telling us what you think about the podcast. It is amazing. But don't delay. Get right on this, as we're going to be giving away that No Guilt Mom gift card on December 21st. So get right on over and visit noguiltmom.com/review.
Welcome to the No Guilt Mom podcast. I am your host, Joanne Crone, joined here by my co-host, Bree Tucker.
Well, hello, everybody. How are you?
We were just talking actually about the state fair, and I felt like a little carnival announcer, Bree Tucker.
I know, right? I love how we have our state fair here in Arizona in October, like September, October time, because Is
that rare?
It is. Yes. In the Midwest, they tend to have it more in the summer.
Oh, yeah. That would not work here.
No. Can you imagine trying to get on any of the rides when it's 115 degrees outside? I burn my butt just getting into my car.
It'd be horrible. Even October, it's still a little hot outside here. And I'm just saying, I don't want to go during the day. I kind of want to go at night, but I don't want to go at night either. Maybe I just don't want to go.
No, you want to go. You just want the weather to be a little bit nicer. I wish last week we had fantastic weather. I was actually able to wear jeans a couple of days. Yeah. I loved it. And then now I'm back to sleeveless tanks and shorts again because it's all sticky and muggy.
Yeah, it is. It is what it is.
But the state fair does include, we were talking about the lovely array of deep fried foods.
Deep fried foods, deep fried Snickers, oh my gosh.
Oreos.
You know, the best state fair thing I've ever seen, and this was when I lived in California, it was a chicken sandwich, a fried chicken sandwich, but the buns were Krispy Kreme donuts.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I was I didn't eat it, but I'm that is the epitome of state fair food right there.
That is something that only a kid can digest.
Yeah.
And be happy about, because I would probably eat one bite and be this tastes so good. And immediately I'd hear my stomach go gurgle, gurgle, gurgle.
Yeah.
And then you're I'm at the state fair. I can only use a porta potty.
But deep fried Snicker bars, I am all about. When we lived in LA, we used to make them my friends had a deep fryer. And all you do is you wrap little Snickers miniatures in dough and pop them in the deep fryer, and it's they come out, and think of a donut with chocolate and caramel in the middle.
Wouldn't
it
be? It'd be all melty and
in
gooey,
the middle,
right?
yeah,
right?
In the middle, it's a chocolate caramel
eclair type thing.
Yeah, it's delicious. But and it has nothing to do about what our guest is today.
I know
who our guest is. Our guest is the wonderful Melinda Moyer, and I first found her because she wrote an amazing book that totally caught my attention called "How to Raise Kids Who Aren't Assholes."
I think that's a very, very good title. It really cuts through the core of yep, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah,
it's not raise assholes.
And the way she does it is she takes all the science and all the research, because she is a science journalist and columnist for the New York Times. But she takes all of that and applies it to parenting and applies it to how you can actually use this into what you do in your day-to-day life.
I know, right? Because that's kind of what we need these days. There's so much out there. We need it. Actually, I'm getting ready to say it follows along with No Guilt Mom very well.
It does.
That's what we try to do. We try to get all the research for you and then present it all on a pretty little plate.
Little
not
package.
Deep fried, but on a plate.
Oh, we should deep fry it. Can you imagine how many more people would be interested in parenting advice if we're deep fried parenting advice?
Yes.
If only we can find a way. Until we do, enjoy our conversation with Melinda Wenner Moyer.
You want mom life to be easier. That's our goal too. Our mission is to raise more self-sufficient and independent kids, and we're going to have fun doing it. We're going to help you delegate and step back. Each episode will tackle strategies for positive discipline, making our kids more responsible and making our lives better in the process. Welcome to the No Guilt Mom podcast.
Welcome, Melinda, to the No Guilt Mom podcast. I'm so excited to have you here because I was just listening again to your book, which is so wonderfully named, How to Raise Kids Who Aren't Assholes, this morning. And I'm just so overjoyed to talk to you. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Now, I love how in your writing, you really take the science around raising kids and being a parent and you're very successful in making it applicable to like us who aren't quite science minded. What did you see? Like, what challenges did you see happening that led you to write this kind of book?
Yeah. So let's rewind a little bit. I love using science to answer like every question that I have in the world. That's just sort of been how I've been since I was a kid. And so I'm a science journalist. I have been since 2007 now, which is like, oh my God, that's like, I'm so old.
I feel that way all the time too. When I think back to the 2000s, I'm like, what year is it? Oh my gosh.
I know. Yeah. Like those things that are going on right now where it's like 20 years ago. Yeah. Back in 1990, they're like, no.
Or having to scroll back so far for your birth date, that too. But go ahead.
It's a roulette thing now. I just go,
it's true.
Sometimes it's true. It's like the wheel from
Price is Right.
Yes. Speaking of being old, right? The Price is Right. Yeah. I used to watch that as a kid. So I have always tried to answer my own parenting questions by looking at science. And as you know, at first when I had little kids, my questions were like, related to keeping them alive, like, is it safe to swaddle my kid or not? And like all the advice I feel like I stumbled across was contradictory. And I was always so confused. So that's why I turned to science to see, like, does research give us any kind of consensus on these questions? But as my kids got older, I found that the kinds of questions I had shifted. And this was, 3 or 4 years ago too. I felt like there was just like a lot of bad behavior in the world that was very apparent, like people just not treating each other well, a lot of bullying behavior that was being seen on TV and in the media and stuff too. And my kids were getting a little older, and I remember thinking, like, what are they learning from this? Are they learning from the bad behavior around them? Because we know from social psychology that children learn what's appropriate behavior by looking at what other people, especially people in positions of power, are doing. And I realized that like my biggest question was basically, how do I not raise assholes in this world in which I feel like there are a lot of assholes that are modeling bad behavior?
I feel like a lot of us have that question.
Yeah. Well, so that was the other thing, is I started talking to other parents, and I realized they also, like, at the core, this was their biggest question. Like, how do I not raise an asshole? And so I started looking to see, like, is there research on this question? Is there, can I look in the child development literature and the parenting literature? And I realized there was like a ton of research in various like subcategories of this question that was really interesting. And some of it was really surprising. And that's when I was like, okay, I want to translate this science into something that, average parents can read and understand and take some insights away from. But the other thing that was like really interesting about the research was that even though it gave like really helpful insights that were kind of broad, it also taught me that there's not one single right way to parent. And that I felt like was another really important point to be making in the book. Like, there are so many ways to be a good parent, and it really depends on you and your kids too, and how you engage with them. Really, you have to respond to who your kids are. And that was like another big theme that I wanted to come through, that like this idea that, you have to do a certain thing in order to be a good parent and you can never make mistakes. Like, that is not at all true. The research shows that's not true.
And there's also the factor too, like you talked about how you have to be considerate and think about meeting your kids where they are. But also, like, to elaborate on that, every family has a different structure. And again, you may have a sister, a best friend that you share so many core beliefs with, but their family structure is so different than yours. They're going to have to do things differently.
Absolutely. Yes.
And that's comforting to know that you don't have to fit into a particular mold to be a good parent. But going on that, there are many ways to be a good parent. But in your research, did you find ways that you definitely should not do as a parent?
Well, there are things that if you can avoid doing them to the degree possible, then that's for the best. But with the caveat that if you make mistakes for a while, it doesn't mean that your kid is doomed for life. Like, I would say yelling at your kids is probably not the best way to engage with your kids, but I do it. Like, we all do it sometimes, and that's okay, because also sometimes that gives us opportunities to, come back to our kids and take responsibility for our actions and model how to make an actual real apology in these things.
Yes.
But yes.
I feel like I read all the time about things that are recommended you do as a parent. I'm like, oh, shoot. I'm not doing this, and my child is going to be like,
that's
totally.
I think that's where a lot of us go, right?
It's where a lot of us go.
Like we try not to. Like the logical side of our brain is, I know that by yelling at my kid one time or by, giving in and not holding my boundary this time, that it's not going to ruin my kid. But the logical side of your head says that. But then there's that little devil voice in your head that's like, oh no, you just ruined the whole thing. You just ruined the whole thing.
Totally.
And like we talked about on the podcast, now my kid's going to end up in a van down by the river with no job and just eating like ramen noodles or whatever like they can find.
That'd be yummy, ramen noodles. Forever.
I know.
I would eat that.
It's not that bad. It's not the worst life.
It's not the worst life.
True.
A little bit of a blood pressure issue from the sodium there. But hey, other than that, it's all good.
We're hitting that time of year where my brain gets so overloaded in December that I look for anything to make life easier. And I have to say, Brie, that Green Chef is one of those services.
Yes, Green Chef is there to take away the dreaded, oh my goodness, what are we going to eat for dinner tonight? You can eat clean all holiday long with over 80 weekly meal options each week, featuring things like quick and easy, protein-packed, calorie-smart, or my personal favorite, the keto options.
And you don't have to lose track of healthy eating habits during the holidays because every Green Chef customer gets a free session with one of their registered dietitians who can walk you through how to make clean eating work for you, which is very cool.
And I have to say that I have been loving their recipes lately. They put things together I have never thought of. This week, we're trying the lemon basil caper pork with sauteed cauliflower, bell peppers, almonds, and feta cheese, my favorite. Their recipes make it so easy to support my wellness goals without skipping on flavor.
For Green Chef's best deal of the year, get $250 off with code NGM250 at greenchef.com/NGM250. That's greenchef.com/NGM250. And don't forget to use that code NGM250 to get $250 off.
Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. Hey, Aubrey here, and I wanted to share one of my favorite gifts to give during the holiday season, a Storyworth book. It is the most amazing gift ever. Storyworth is an online service that lets you create a special and unique gift of someone's story. I've given Storyworth books to both of my parents, and it has been their favorite gift, hands down. And did I mention it is so easy? Storyworth emailed my parents questions every week that I handpicked from their massive list of questions that they have. All my parents had to do was open their email and answer them. That easy. I asked my dad questions like, did you have any rules that you set for yourself as a parent, which you immediately broke? And he did. I even asked both of my parents, are you more like your mom or your dad? And they shared a lot of really amazing qualities that I didn't know about my grandparents at the time. Then at the end of the year, Storyworth compiles all of their answers, puts them into this gorgeous book that covers everything. My parents love showing us their books, and I personally love getting a chance to read them. With Storyworth, I am giving those I love a thoughtful and personal gift from the heart that preserves their memories and stories for years to come. Go to storyworth.com/NGM and save $10 on your first purchase. That's storyworth.com/NGM to save $10 on your first purchase.
As I was listening to your book this morning, I came across one of the chapters you did on praise and contingent praise and how it relates to kids' self-esteem and how it what I found very, very, very interesting is how in your book you kind of differentiated between raising a kid with good self-esteem and raising a child who's a narcissist, which I think based on your earlier comments, we're seeing a lot of examples of probably narcissism in our media and from our previous leaders. Can you briefly describe how do you know if you're raising a kid's self-esteem through praise or if you are contributing to raising a narcissist?
Yes, great question. So one thing I found that I found to be a big relief was I had this idea going into looking into this research on narcissism and self-esteem that narcissism was what happened if you filled your kid's self-esteem bucket up too high. If you were too loving or something. I was like, if I love my kid too much, are they going to become a narcissist? And that's not, thankfully, what the research says. Love is good for our kids. But what we don't want to be doing and what we know can increase the risk of narcissism is if we're kind of not genuine in the way that we react to our kids. And let's say they do terrible things and we're like, oh, sweetie, you're perfect. Don't worry about any of the things that you're doing. Like, we were talking about this earlier. Like, if your kid is like throwing poop across the room and you're the type of parent to be like, oh, isn't he so funny? Isn't that charming? Like, that's not a good thing to do. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's like when you're a parent who really like you treat your kid like they can do no wrong, that's one thing that we don't want to be doing. Another thing is like really, giving what's called inflated praise, like overinflated praise, where like your kid does something that's like nice. And then you're just over the top, like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You're so amazing.
You are now the new Mother Teresa.
Yes, exactly. That kind of feedback also is linked to an increased risk for developing narcissism. So those are two things that we don't want to be doing. And then the other way to develop narcissism is actually like really complicated, is really through like not letting, like abuse is another way, and not showing our kids that we love them and not telling them that we love them, and just being really like emotionally closed off and kind of nasty parents. Like those kids, this is where like I think of former leaders, like those kids can also become narcissists when they really have like a very, very bad upbringing. So
when I'm hearing, get Letty love.
Yeah, I was going to say what I'm hearing there is almost like it's conditional love. You only get my praise.
Right. So this is another thing. And I don't know that it's exactly related to narcissism, but it is a really big problem when we think about kids' self-esteem. And this was something I was not expecting. I was talking about how a lot of the research I came across was surprising. Well, I really wanted to understand, what do we know about how healthy self-esteem develops in kids? And there is now this huge literature I'd never heard of showing that when we put a lot of pressure on our kids to excel, to do well in school, to get the lead in the play, to be on the soccer team, to get high SAT scores, whatever it is, or to have perfect behavior. When we put pressure on our kids to do these things, and we make it clear that this is really important to us, that our kids do these things, one way we make it clear is through this kind of contingent love, where we treat our kids better when they do the things we want them to do, when they perform the way we want them to perform, when they achieve the things we want them to achieve. That is really not good for kids' self-esteem, because ultimately, even though we don't mean for it to come across this way, it teaches kids that our love for them is contingent on what they achieve, what grades they get, how well they're doing on certain activities or whatever. And that means that they don't feel universally loved, like they don't feel unconditionally loved. And that is really, really bad for their self-esteem.
Yeah, that actually struck me in the book. And you followed up with it too, but like, because we all get mad. We all get disappointed. We like when something doesn't happen or when our kids act a certain way. I mean, like just last night, like my son came to me after I was like preparing dinner. He's like, I just don't want a pumpkin enchilada, Mom. Can you make me a quesadilla? And automatically my face fell and I was like, okay.
Why didn't you call me? I would have come over for dinner at your house last night.
I know, it was good. But I was like, okay. And then immediately in him, I see him turn. He's like, I'm sorry. And we all get like that disappointed as parents. And so it's not saying that you should never show your disappointment or show your displeasure with your kids when something doesn't happen the way you would like it to happen. But really, it's talking with them afterwards and saying like, okay, like letting yourself cool down, coming back to the situation and talking it through and explaining your reasons behind it.
Yeah, it's almost like in that situation, it's like, I wasn't mad. You don't need to apologize for what you said. My thought was, oh gosh, now I got to make something else. And I just didn't have the time or the energy to do it.
Yeah. My thought was like, no way.
I'm drawing a hard boundary line. We were talking about boundaries this morning. I'm drawing a hard boundary line. But I like what you were talking though about it being contingent, because we were talking about that earlier too.
The contingent. And I mean, like a lot of us have experienced that, especially growing up in like the 90s where, you were supposed to get good grades and we had banks, like bank accounts that were set up with local banks that would pay you per grade.
Oh, I think
the banks still do that. Like if students set up an account, you get like $20 for an A and then like $10 for a B.
Okay. I'm going to say what I remember being paid for was I brought my report card in and I got coins to go to Showbiz Pizza, which is like Chuck E. Cheese.
Showbiz.
I wanted those A's because I wanted my 25 coins.
But that paying for grades, it still goes on. I hear like my daughter's parents do it. She tells me about it, that they have to earn a certain grade to be able to raise money to go to this thing. What research have you found about the paying for grades?
I haven't found specific research on that practice, but it fits into this broader category of both. Essentially it falls under the idea of like, what are we doing that shows our priorities to our kids are how they perform? This is we are shown, when we pay our kids for good grades, we are communicating to them very directly that this is one of the most important things that you can do as my child is to get good grades. This is one of the most important things to me. And, money, like what more direct way can you talk about value than like literally paying your kids to get good grades? And so this is what it's communicating to them. Like, this is the most important thing to me. And we know what we do know from research is that a lot of kids, especially kids who go to like schools that are high performing schools, like, schools that put a lot of pressure on kids or where parents put a lot of pressure on their kids, that those kids will actually say to researchers, I think my parents care more about my grades than they do about me. They love my academics more than they love me. And so they really do internalize this as like a lack of love and unconditional love. And then that really gives them a hit to their self-esteem. But it's so hard. And so I think it's like, you also have to think about the ways in which you might inadvertently be communicating to your kids that grades are important to you. And just as an example, a very relevant example in my life, my third grader just started having to do timed multiplication quizzes, which I hate for many reasons, and I don't have time to get into. But she was really anxious about them. And I just wanted her to not be anxious more than anything. I'm like, I don't care if you don't pass this. I just, want you to not worry so much about it. But she had her first quiz on Tuesday, and she came home from school. And I was dying to know how she did, not because I really cared if she passed, but I wanted to know, like, is she emotionally okay? Was it stressful? Like, was it a terrible experience? But I went out of my way to not bring it up because like she walked in the door and I wanted to be like, how did math go? But then that was going to communicate to her that I cared about her grade. Even, I didn't really, but like it was going to make her worry that I thought, I was thinking about her grade all day. And so I didn't bring it up and I didn't bring it up. And then she was doing her math homework and she was like, oh, Mom, I didn't pass this time. I have to take it again. And I was like, oh, that's okay. No worries. Like, but we have to sort of take those moments and be intentional about how we're engaging with our kids and what it might be communicating in those moments.
Yes, I hold myself back from those as well. The asking about grades and tests. I used to be a former elementary school teacher, and I actually share your same dislike of the time tests. I did not like that I had to have my students take them. My son is playing a game right now on his computer where he's a thief and the cops are after him. So I'm so excited about this new app, Give As We Grow, where instead of being the quote unquote bad guys, kids are practicing giving back.
That is so cool, Joanne. I really wish that there was something like this when my kids were younger that got them excited about giving back to others and helped them build a better understanding of what it really means to volunteer.
Give As We Grow is the first of its kind free educational mobile app for children ages 8 to 11 that teaches kids via fun, service-focused minigame quests to tap into their unique talents and interests to help others.
And did you know that studies show that there is a biological connection between generosity and happiness, and that volunteering improves people's physical and mental health? I mean, kids who volunteer typically do better in school and are less likely to engage in risky behaviors. And that is something that I think we all want for our kids.
Ready to spark a new movement in generosity? Find and download Give As We Grow for free in the App Store for Android and iOS. And for resources for the whole family, visit giveaswegrow.org. This message is sponsored by Greenlight. It is so hard to raise kids who know how to manage money. Bree, right now, my kids are all about earning money for presents. My daughter wants to get presents for all of her friends, and my son is doing a Secret Santa with his friends.
Oh, I hear you. And if you're looking to raise kids that are financially responsible, we have got a lifesaver recommendation for you that you need to check out. It is Greenlight. Greenlight is a debit card and money app made for families that gives kids and teens an easy and fun way to gain financial literacy, all while giving parents peace of mind.
You can send instant money transfers, automate allowance, and even keep an eye on kids' spending with real-time notifications. Meanwhile, your kids can begin their journey towards financial autonomy by learning how to save, invest, and spend wisely.
So sign up for Greenlight today and get your first month free when you go to greenlight.com/NGM.
That's greenlight.com/NGM to try Greenlight for free. Greenlight.com/NGM. But just the what you want to ask is so different than what your kids need at that moment. Because usually from what I've seen is that my daughter or my son will get in the car, and eventually the question I have on my mind about the grade or the test that they've been worried about, or like the part in the school play, they will bring up naturally in conversation. Like it'll definitely come up. And then you're like playing this nonchalance game. Like you're like, oh, great. Okay. When inside you're like, okay, yes.
Unfortunately,
I got that question answered.
Unfortunately, that little anxiety demon pops out of me way more often than I wish it would. Of the whole, like, how are you doing?
Yeah. This does bring up one more aspect of this issue from a different chapter in my book. I think, actually, I don't really remember if it was a different chapter, but I talk about rewards and the effect that they can have on kids. And this is something where I have used rewards in the past. And then I started digging into the research and realized, okay, actually, if you do something like pay kids for grades or give them rewards after they do something that you like, then it does ultimately slowly erode their intrinsic motivation to do that thing. And there've been really fascinating studies on this, like where they've, had kids who like to draw, like ask them to draw things, and then gave some of the kids rewards after they drew them. And some of the kids didn't get rewards. And then the next time they put markers in front of the kids who had been paid to or rewarded for drawing were less interested in drawing after that, like if they weren't going to be given the reward. So we do know that it slowly, deflates your intrinsic motivation if you have received a reward for it in the past. So that's another reason why you probably don't want to pay for grades, is exactly what you're saying. Like then your kid gets to college and it's like, well, I am not getting paid for this. Why do I care what grades I get? And
right. And I mean, you hear people argue the whole point of like, well, later on in life in jobs, right? If we're doing well, we tend to get bonuses or raises, and it helps prepare my child for that part of life. And it's like, well, I hear what you're saying, but your kid is still a kid right now. So they don't have the same mindset. They don't have the ability to wrap their head around that concept and everything. And there's a reason that adults get that, and that perhaps it isn't the best thing to start with kids.
Yeah, but also if you think of like bonuses and stuff like that, they are very subjective. They're subjective based on the boss, and they're usually not measured by anything else. And so bonuses cause adults a fair amount of stress, and you always like compared to your colleagues, and like don't even get me started with gender differences and like how men are usually rewarded more than women, like all of those things. To be aware of in that world where it's not exactly the most ideal circumstance we're talking about when we're comparing them getting bonuses and as an adult to what we're raising them to do as kids.
Yeah.
So it's funny because I've been aware of this research, especially as a teacher. And so we de-emphasize grades in our house, so much so that my daughter came to me and she's like, yeah, I was talking with my friends and they're like, don't your parents care about your grades? They're like, no, my parents don't care about my grades. And I'm like, well, this just makes me sound like I am the most not with it parent and like really like over here on the couch. Like,
but the thing is
out.
though, is that she realizes that like, and I guess that's the part of the conversation, is that she may say it that way and people might dig in more questions, and they're going to say like, what, your parents don't care about your school at all? And she'll probably say, well, they do. Mm-hmm. They help me when I need it, but they don't yell at me if I got a bad grade on a test. And then that's when it'll come out of like, okay.
Yeah. And I did clarify. And she's like, well, yeah, Mom, of course.
But that's not how they communicate. And then like again, that little anxiety demon pops out of your head of like, everybody's going to judge me now.
Yep. I know. They have the damnedest way of saying things sometimes.
Right?
It's hilarious. Well, what are you excited about right now going on in your life, Melinda?
So I have been expanding my newsletter. I have a parenting newsletter on Substack called Is My Kid the Asshole? Which is like a joke based on, I realize not everybody knows this Reddit meme, Am I the Asshole? Where like people write in and they say like, I, did this thing to my girlfriend and she's mad and am I the asshole? And they're always the asshole, but
like, yes.
But I feel like my newsletter is maybe the opposite, where it's, I talk about challenging kid behavior and people write in with like, my kid does this thing, is my kid the asshole? And usually almost always the answer is no, your kid is not the asshole. Here's why that behavior is normal. And here's how research suggests you can manage it maybe. But I've been doing a lot more with my newsletter recently. So I'm super excited about it and having a lot of fun with it, just answering like all the questions I get from parents and calling up experts. And it helps me a lot as a parent to have the ability to basically answer my own and other people's big parenting questions.
I love that. I think I have to subscribe to your newsletter. because I will have that question popping through my head all the time.
I love it too. I was actually looking through your newsletter and you were talking about teen sleep, because that is something that is on my mind a lot with the high school freshmen who start school at 7:20 in the morning.
Here. Yeah, I think California did a good thing. California, you know, and it doesn't, and you're right, like talking about the research, it doesn't make any sense. The research says that they need more sleep. And yet traditionally, this is how our schools have always gone, right? Like elementary, it's elementary latest and then up.
And for those of you who we've like kind of gone in the middle of this conversation for, who might be thinking like, oh, well, teenagers can go to bed earlier, their circadian rhythm actually shifts when they're a teenager. So this is why this is such a big deal, why we're talking about it.
There's actually a physiological reason for
it. Yep. And it's really bad. Lisa Lewis wrote this great book, The Sleep Deprived Teen, and it talks about all of the downstream consequences of sleep deprivation in teens. And it's like, I mean, you can't even like count them all. There's so many, but like mental health and their academics suffer, and they're more likely to get injured. They're more likely to take risks that, like, you know, driving too fast, more likely to self-harm. I mean, and there's
all the
equity
things we don't want to have happen, right?
All the things. It's so dumb.
And it seems like such a simple solution, a simple solution that people just will not do. Like, just shift it later. We get them more sleep, and look.
I get it from an admin perspective of the school that it's you got to like reroute buses and staffing and all that kind of stuff, but it's doable.
It's doable.
If you give people enough time, notice, and resources, they can make it happen. And if it would have such a positive impact on so many kids going forward, it's a no-brainer to do it.
Well, especially, think of it this way. You could start the elementary schools earlier, and those high school students can also help their get kids to school in the morning too, if they don't have to be at school on time, or I don't know. There's a lot of benefits.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a very good point for a lot of families.
I know, just reverse them, right? Yeah, it's ridiculous because my littler kid wakes up so much earlier than my bigger kid. It's just common sense to have it switched. And yeah.
Well, it has been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're so welcome. This was awesome.
Yeah, we'll talk to you later.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, guys, this is like a call out to researchers out there. Obviously, we need to have a study done on the correlation or the effects of paying our kids for grades.
There's no research on it.
Melinda said she couldn't find anything that was specific, target right on. That was the exact focus of the study. And I want to see it.
I want to see it too. I bet you could do it, because I was thinking how hard it is to do research on parenting, because you basically have to have a control group and a test group. And it's really hard to justify doing something that has poor outcomes for kids.
Right.
Making people do that. So you have to find people who are doing that already. But I think you can with grades, because I think it hasn't been proven absolutely that paying for grades is associated with poor outcomes.
Well, right. And like we already said earlier, when you and I were talking off mic, we know a lot of people that do it.
Yes, a lot of people.
So, I mean, I don't think it would be hard, but it is, it wouldn't be hard to find the people, but you got to think about the longitude of that study.
Yeah.
Right?
You need,
how
probably
long?
Good 20 years. I think 20 years. Take it from high school and then follow those kids and see how they're doing in their careers. But also, I think you have to assess their mental health and their mental states and how they view challenges or.
Well, and I don't even know if high school's early enough. You might need to start at middle school.
Middle school or elementary school. It starts in elementary school.
It can. But yeah, and obviously we're giving our opinion on this one, that both of us, we don't do that. We have our feelings that we don't think that that's effective in our families with our kids.
Yes.
But I want to see this research. So if you are listening to us and you do research or you fund research, I'm putting out a request for this one. Request for proposal.
Well, until next time, remember, the best mom is a happy mom. Take care of you, and we will talk to you later.
Thanks for stopping by. Are you looking for something to listen to with your whole family? Then check out 6 Minutes, produced and created by Gen Z Media. With over 200 twisty, cliffhanger-filled episodes, 6 Minutes tells the story of 11-year-old Holiday, who is pulled from the icy waters with no memory of who she is or where she came from.
3 years ago, Brinley Pasternak helped the Anders family uncover the truth about Holiday's past. Now she'll need them to help her find the truth about hers. In 6 Minutes Out of Time, the long-awaited sequel, Cyrus Anders is found unconscious near the mysterious Elixir Academy in Florida, and Brinley learns the school may have a shocking connection to her missing mother.
Dive in now and get the most downloaded family audio adventure in history. Follow 6 Minutes wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen early and ad-free with the GZM family subscription.